The Great Green Wall program is a Pan-African initiative conceived to address land degradation and desertification, boost food security, and support communities to adapt to climate change in the Sahel-Sahara region of Africa. You're watching AMOI Unplugged. Today, our guest, Dr. Bukar Hassan, the Dynamic Director General of the National Agency for the Great Green Wall, will enlighten us on the mandate and operations of the agency. I am Chioma Ikejani, and it's AMOI Unplugged, exploring diversity. Thank you so much for having AMOI in your office, and it is a pleasure to be here.
Let me start by thanking you for having me. I'm happy that we are here to talk about something that really interests me as a person, something I've dreamt, I slept, and thought about it all the time.
What exactly led to the establishment of this agency?
Yeah, you may recall that in 1992, there was this Earth conference held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where the international community gathered specifically to look at issues of environment. They had at the back of their mind to discuss issues of biodiversity and climate change, which were just coming up. Now, in the course of the conference, some of the African leaders thought that, okay, if we are going to look at biodiversity and climate change, which then was thought as a major issue in the developed world, what can you give us in exchange so that we can carry something home? So it was at that point that the issue of desertification came up. And therefore, a convention of desertification was added to what was being negotiated at Rio. So the Rio conference produced 3 international protocols: the Climate Change Convention, the Biodiversity Convention, and the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Now, when that convention, the Desertification Convention, when it was negotiated, after it has been signed by countries, about 150 countries, then it now came to the point of implementation. So at AU meeting in 2005, the African countries then decided to say, okay, how now do we implement this convention, which is specific for Africa? And their decision, one of their decisions was to make every country party to the convention have a department or an agency that will be responsible for implementing that convention within the country, and of course in collaboration with other country offices, because this issue cut across political boundaries. And therefore there has to be a mechanism that will bring all parties together and tackle it both at national level and also at international level. And in Nigeria, the issue of the convention now come up, the office come up, and that's how we got the agency. But as I said earlier, before the agency was established, we at the Department of Drought and Desertification in the ministry was handling it as a program before it became an agency in 2015.
How was Nigeria, how was the government handling the issue of desertification that was happening in the north?
Yeah, if you recall, there was a very serious drought in 1973. I think that was about the worst drought Nigeria as a country had ever experienced. It was a regional drought. But Nigeria's experience was very, very serious. We lost a lot of livestock. We lost people from the drought, the starvation that followed, because when you have that kind of thing, you now see a situation where the food security is threatened. And there was a very serious food security issues. So that woke up the Nigerian government to start looking at the issue of the desertification and drought. How do we now ameliorate this kind of phenomenon when they happen in the future? So the issue of tree planting started in 1973, and then there was a Department of Forestry then in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources then. That is where the issue of tackling desertification started in Nigeria. So when the Federal Ministry of Environment was created in 2001, that department was moved out of Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources to Ministry of Environment, and they were now responsible for the planting of trees and other activities relating to combating land degradation in dry lands of this country.
What was the mandate? What was the vision and the objectives?
The vision was of our leader then was to see a situation where the dry land becomes sustainable. The dry land sustains our development efforts as a country. The dry land should continue to provide food security in this country, because whether we like it or not, the dry lands, agriculture, there is rich in agriculture before now. But when the climate change issue came, it becomes something else. The issue got worse. You begin to find a situation where farmers are finding it difficult when to crop or when to plant their crops. So that's our vision. The vision was to make sure that whether there was climate change or not, the drylands of this country must remain rich for agricultural purposes, whether it's agriculture, whether it's crop farming, whether it's tree farming, whatever type of agriculture you want to, that land should remain, so that we do not see our situation where our children, are working the street malnourished. So that is vision. So as an agency, what is really our own mission? Our mission in relation to the vision is to ensure that this issue of desertification, which continuously moves from the north to south, gradually is stopped. Because if you don't stop it, you may walk one day in Benue, for example, in Makodi, and you find your desert at your doorstep. So that is our own mission. So in that case, we have been mandated, therefore, to make sure that we slow down or halt the movement of desertification, and also improve the livelihood of the people through making them resilient enough to be able to continue their activities in the dry land, regardless of climate change, regardless of drought that may come. So it's a combination of so many things that constitute our mandate. But in a nutshell, that's our vision, mission, and mandate.
Earlier you talked about the forest department. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the Afforestation program, and how were you working with local states to make sure that this program is efficient and effective for the communities that it serves?
Yeah, thank you. The Federal Department of Forestry I mentioned has a mandate to look after our forest resources at national level in all the 36 states and FCT. The agency, in its own mandate, has a mandate to work in the dry lands of this country, which is constituted by 11 states in the northern part of the country. The 5 uppermost, which are the driest part, and those that are adjacent to these 5 states, 6 states making the 11. That's where we function. We work with the forestry department hand in hand, because they are like our, mother, if you like. We work with them, even in the 11 frontline states, because if you look at forestry, there's the research component, there's the implementation component, and there's the policy component. Now coming down to the state, that's where the critical partnership is. Nigeria being a federated state, whatever the federal government does is seen as an intervention. It is the responsibility of the state and local governments to do all these things we are intervening in. So if the federal government is only intervening, the state must be there, therefore, to work with us in order to ensure that whatever mandate we have are implemented to the letter. After all, we are working to the people, we're working for the people in those states whose mandates lie in the hands of the state governments. So our primary partners are actually state governments. What really supports that more is the fact that the federal government does not have land by the Land Use Act of 1979. The land is the property of the states, which through devolution powers went down to the communities. So we have to work with them in order for us to have that piece of land to do whatever we do in terms of investment. And of course, the local governments are also partners. But the most critical partner for us are the people we work for. Because as a government, you cannot be there forever. You can establish a project which the people know very well that it's going to help them, but you won't be there to maintain it. After a while, you have to go back. So you have to work with the community in such a way that they don't only accept you, but also they accept to manage and sustain the project after you have done it. So that is why it is critical. Our project will be as successful as you can imagine, but if the community do not buy it and sustain it after we have gone, then we go back to square one. And so we would have succeeded in wasting government money without any benefit to the people.
We'll be right back. It's AMOI Unplugged, and it's Chioma Ikejani. You know, so far, I think since the inception of the agency, one of the things that you've talked about is that prior to this, there was a threat to life. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about the initiatives and projects that will empower those communities that the agency is embarking on.
We are there to support the people to continue their lives. Now, how and what are we doing in order to, support the people? There are two broad categories, what we do. There are the physical field investment, and there are the livelihood projects we do directly to the people themselves. If you ask me which one is more important, I will tell you the provision of livelihood is more important to me than the field investment. But at this point where we are, you have to carry the two. You know very well that there's a desert in Texas, for instance, in the United States. Nobody asks people to go and plant trees out because the people themselves are capacitated enough to handle the situation on the ground. But we have not reached this stage. We are trying to capacitate the people at the same time bring up the land to such a way that they can be able to cultivate as they used to. So these are the two broad areas. Now, if you want us to split that down, let's take the field investment, for instance. There's a number of plantation models we do, ranging from social forestry to forestry activity safe, to gardens, to street or road plantations, natural regeneration plantations, and agroforestry. These are all some of the things we do. Now, taking them one after the other, the main one we are really involved in are the shelter belts, which you might have heard. Now, what are these shelter belts? Shelter belts are just a green line of trees put in place to reduce the speed of the wind, which otherwise will carry away the topsoil. And you and I know that the topsoil is the richer part of the soil that sustains the crops. So if you now have a band of live trees to a certain height, it reduces the speed of the wind. So what you have on the windward side is protected. And therefore, the issue of losing the topsoil is minimized. And therefore, the farmer will be happy because his land will remain fertile. Government that provide infrastructure, which are normally filled up or blocked or covered by this moving sand, is protected. So that is the essence of having shelter belt. And if you go to the field, you find shelter belts there in every direction. When you are putting down a shelter belt, you look at the direction of the wind, the speed of the wind, and that will now determine how you are going to align these trees, and also will determine the type of trees you have to plant to get the right height to stop the wind, the blowing wind. So that's shelter belt. Agroforestry, yes, you work with the farmer. He may have a bare farm, and he cultivates only, when the rain comes. But if you say, okay, why don't you have few trees of mango, which you can have at dry season, pluck it and sell, or you have orange on it, dry season, pluck and sell. In the wet season, you come back and crop your land. So you get revenue all year round. The farmer gets income year round, and that is the essence of agroforestry. Roadside planting, yes, you have to protect the road. If you don't, at the end of the day, it's going to be like a desert anyway, so there won't be any road. The wells, you have to protect the schools. That's why we have institutional planting. Many schools are covered in the desert, and you realize it's like a story, but it happens. So this is sort of afforestation we do. Now, quickly then go to the livelihood issues. The livelihood issues, as I said, is you want to enable the family income to grow, so that the man will be able to take his wife to hospital, his children to school, those daily needs. Because relying on this seasonal cropping means that he won't have enough. And that is why you find many of these able bodies in the rural areas move to the cities. We want to prevent that. We want to stop that. Provide them with income, provide them with something to do, whether it's on land or off land.
So it's like income generation.
Income generation. through skill acquisition and other things. These are things we do every now and then.
But let me ask you another question, because I think that there's a demographics that plays another key that I'd like you to speak about. And I know that the president talked about the teeming youths. What role do they play in advocating? And how do you work with the youths?
Basically, two ways. Ideally, a child growing in a particular area, whether rural or urban, should learn, whether in school or outside school, his own environment. He should be able to know his own environment. And what are the issues in the environment? These are the things he has to learn and grow up with. And our institutional environmental initiative with schools provide just that. We try to ensure that their environment in school is green, so that they now grow up with this idea of having a green land, an area that is quite friendly, an area where there's little dust that will, disturb them, an area where when they leave, they will be able to say, okay, this is a good thing we learned in school, let me go and do it on my farm or on my father's farm or on my own, so that I'll be able to have a better life in the future. I don't have to move away from my village and then come to Kano City and begin to do some, shoe polishing or whatever you want to call it. So that's one area. The other area, which is also we're trying to pursue, is an area where we look at the curriculum of these schools. Are there environmental issues instilled in the curriculum? Open discussion with the state government or the local government authorities that are responsible for primary schools, and the state governments who are responsible for secondary schools, to look and see if we can encapsulate this into their curriculum, so that when they graduate, they have all that. Thirdly, to a certain extent, is whenever we have this sensitization program, we involve them, because they are the eyes of their parents and their grandparents. And the parents believe their own children more than me. So once we involve them in this, you are surer of getting the success you need than bringing a consultant somewhere, a consultant somewhere far away who doesn't even understand the sociocultural setting of these places. And
they probably don't trust them.
How would they? This one was brought by government, so okay, he's gone. Very soon he will go. So allow him to talk, and then when he goes, he goes. But if it is one child, with him, come, you are telling me something that day. What really? I didn't understand. Sit down, and it becomes, they accept it better, and they learn more.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's why the youth are really important to us. And that is why we have a problem now in some of the areas with insecurity issues, because the schools are closed for the last 10 years.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about, the Chad Basin. I'd like you to talk about dwindling natural resources, lack of job creation, which is what you're trying to do, food security, the Lake Chad Basin. All those things that are coming up, what role does your agency play in trying to mitigate some of those challenges that are cropping up because of the issues of what we've been discussing?
Yeah, let me start with the Lake Chad Basin, which I know a little bit more about. The Lake Chad Basin 15 to 20 years ago was a heaven of its own class. It's a place where nobody lacks job. Whether you're a fisherman, you're a dryland farmer, you are a wetland, rainy season wetland farmer, or you are just somebody interested in using that fertile land.
It's just a beautiful oasis.
The beautiful oasis provide jobs for 10 million people in a very small area like that. A lake shared by 4 countries then, Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad. Okay. Yeah, those are the countries that share the lake. Now, all of a sudden, you remember there was about 15, 17 years ago, government invested heavily in irrigation of the Lake Chad. They call it South Chad Irrigation Scheme. When the federal government invested heavily, that they wanted hundreds of hectares, thousands of hectares to be irrigated. That even prompted government to site a flour mill in Maiduguri then, to offtake what would have been produced in that basin. Now problems started, which were not, I think, foreseen. The water started receding. Now, the irrigation scheme, I think, was based on gravitational force, free flow. Now, when you have a situation like this, and then the water table goes down, then certainly you won't be able to get the water out. So the scheme suffered. And as the scheme suffered, the farmers also suffered. Because if there's no water, they can irrigate. And that part of the world, the rain is maybe just a few weeks in a year. So the wet season farming is not quite reliable. Now the other aspect is fishing. The same thing suffers. When the water reduces, goes down, the level goes down, the fish population, the fish species reduce because they follow the water. And as it were, most of the area being lost in the Chad was on the Nigerian side. Now as we speak, there's very little water, if any, on the Nigerian side. The challenge is the receding water. And as soon as water recedes, the area is taken over by weeds, these water weeds. And these water weeds are so notorious because they grow fast and they cover a large area in a short time. And once that is done, most of the economic activities are gone.
It's AMOI Unplugged. It's Chioma Kijani, and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back with Dr. Hassan, Director General of the National Agency for the Great Green Wall. What is the agency doing in terms of working with the women folks, the women empowerment programs that you have on ground? If you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mentioned the issue of our skill acquisition for women to be able to learn some handcrafts in order to improve their family income. But one thing I didn't mention was the provision of improved cookstoves. In that part of the country, 95% of the energy comes from fuelwood. And what we are trying to do is to reduce that 90% to about 20%. And in order to do that, we are now providing every household, at least in the communities we are working now, with improved wood stoves, which has two major advantages. It reduces the fuel consumption by 80%, and therefore save them money, time, and energy. And then, of course, it eliminates smoke, which is one of the major killers of women in that part of the country. The smoke they inhale in the course of cooking is eliminated to about 20%. So we now have women that are healthier and hopefully live longer.
What advice can you give us that we can do individually or even collectively to help in terms of trying to offset the crisis that could occur if we don't get a handle on COVID-19? Are people really aware of the looming danger that is about to confront us in Nigeria, starting on those 11 frontline states?
Thank you very much. The frontline states are Adamawa, Bauchi, Gombe, Borno, Yobe, Jigawa, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Zamfara, and Sokoto states. I believe there are 11. The worst hit 5 states are Sokoto, Katsina, Jigawa, Yobe, and Borno states. I think sensitization is the critical issue in our endeavor. People must, one, learn to understand why we are there, what is their benefit, and what are their responsibilities. And this, we in this office cannot achieve that communication. We cannot. Therefore, everybody who has a passion for this, whatever your profession, we need you.
So thank you for sharing your expertise, your passion, your knowledge, and it is such a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you've learned something new. Well, join me again next time for another interesting episode of AMOI Unplugged. Till then, you can follow the conversation on our social media platforms. Thank you for watching. I am Chioma Ikejani. Bye-bye, and don't forget, stay safe.